I managed to brush my thoughts about Fiona's terrible end and my impending future. Currently, Count Green has called the whole family, including me, into the drawing room. Once again, I've been caught in a bad situation. To say the least, I might end up being beaten with a club. Everyone knows that these days, the situation at war is not good. As expected, Count Green's grim expression mirrored the words that came out of his mouth. Yesterday in the Imperial Palace, an order fell on our family. We must send a mage to go to the northern front. Suddenly, my siblings in the drawing room became fussed. However, I nodded calmly. If my guess was to be correct, the current timeline was about 6 years before the original war began. In this world, the war, rather than being a conflict between nations, was more precisely a fight between the forces of evil and humans. The demons were led by cursed dragons, and to block their attack, people who could fight mercenaries, mages, knights, etc. participated in the war. Perhaps during this recent period, the Empire was in a disadvantageous situation because the duration of the war had been pushed out for a long time. The biggest question was, who the hell would want to go to the war? Everyone was a child of a noble family. Count Green, who knew the truth of the matter better than anyone else, gave a fake smile. I wonder if any of my children will bravely volunteer for this glorious thing. Everyone became silent whilst looking at each other. At that time, Dell nudged my side and whispered, "You go, Riceworm ***, gosh, since earlier, this guy." I glanced at him with my eyes twitching. The Count had 4 children. Except me, the youngest, all the 3 above me were born from the Countess. So, all of them wanted me, the bastard child, to go to war instead. Even more, Dell raised his hand and said, "Father, our proud youngest sister wants to go. I think she can't speak up, because she is shy." Well, wait. Of course, I had never said a word. I looked at Dell with my eyes wide open. When his eyes met mine, the snitch smiled menacingly. "This son of a bitch." "Oh, perfect, so you're saying you will go, Fiona." Count Green's face became bright as he welcomed the idea. This father and son duo was exactly the same. Wasn't this what the two had been planning from the beginning? The second sister even started to help them next to me. "Yes, Fiona. Dell has to be in the family to continue, and I'm about to get married. Our third brother, Jen, is about to get engaged to a beautiful and lovely young lady. How can you send the family's limbs, legs, and arms to that situation? You'd better go." "What? I wasn't even taught magic properly since I am an illegitimate child. They locked me up in the attic every day, and then beat me up the second I opened my mouth." Everyone stared at me with their stiff face. I was not so foolish to not know the meaning behind those venomous sly looks directed at me. "You think you can refuse?" The realization came after I finished my judgment about the situation. It was already decided. The thing was, I never had a choice in the first place. If I were to refuse, they would forcibly throw me into the middle of the battlefield like a beast being dragged to the slaughterhouse. In the first place, there was no one on my side in this mansion. No one was going to feel sorry for me either. There was only one line of past settings for Fiona, who was not even the main character. As an illegitimate child, she grew up tormented by her family. That was exactly what was shown to me in front of my eyes. A family who would casually send a 13-year-old into the middle of the battlefield to die. A family who would order a death sentence on an innocent, without batting an eye. For the villainess in her childhood phase, there was no dream or hope. I managed to swallow a sigh, and spoke slowly. "Yes, I understand. I will go." Somehow I felt sad. Even a year ago, when I realized that I first possessed Fiona's body, I wasn't so sad. Did Fiona, the villainess herself who I created, feel this way? I was deeply sorry for some reason. Fiona, who had never been truly loved by anyone in her life, resented the world. One wrong decision led to another. In the end, her choices lead her to a pitfall. The outcome of her future, irreparable. But, unlike her, I didn't feel like blaming anyone easily. Right here, because this is the world I wrote. The Highland were a representative family of the Empire, who had defended the Northern Territory for a long time. The head of the Highland family was Duke Abel Highland, and he was known for being very tough and merciless. Just like the commander who drives the front line. Yeah, this was also the setting that I wrote, and now, I was forced by my parents and my older siblings to go to the Northern Territory, which was ruled by that ruthless Duke Abel Highland. I dug my own grave. As soon as I arrived at the Northern Territory, the first place that I went to was the castle of Duke of Highland. Like the members of Highland, the castle gave off a tremendous sense of pressure. On the outside, it was similar to the demon castle in the story. It was beyond huge and had towering spires and walls that looked like a mountain range. Hey me life. From here on, I would be alone. I could guess that this new job would not be easy. I believe that the workload that I would receive would be a heavy amount. No, maybe before that happens, I'd be kicked out because they didn't need a kid. Yes, of course, I was just a useless kid. In the story, Duke Abel Highland was an important supporting role. More precisely, he was the helper of the male protagonist, Sigren. He was quite popular among readers as a great middle-aged character that helped the main character at every important moment. At the beginning of the book, he was described as in his late 30s. Come this way. The knight who guided me inside the castle stopped. I looked up at the door in front of me. It loomed over me. In front of it I was a mere dwarf. I was sure about where this door would lead me. It should be the entrance to the room where I was going to meet the Duke. Open the door. The knight leading me gave the order to the two soldiers, who appeared to be the door guards. As the two soldiers were pushing the huge door, it opened slowly with a heavy creak. I blinked slowly at the scene unfolding before. The inside room's interior was made out of hard stones that had been carved. The splendor of the room exuded magnificence. However, overall it felt cold. There was a young man sitting in a huge chair in the middle of the room. The young-looking man had hair as white as snow and eyes as blue as a piece of ice. The face itself was beautiful, one that would sharply impress itself in someone's mind. That man was Abel Highland, the character who later became the mentor of the male lead, Sigren. As soon as he met my eyes, he frowned. I'd definitely heard a new mage is coming to apply. The words that followed were so cold that it gave me goosebumps on the nape of my neck and arms. What the hell is this skinny little thing? Well, the dark future days were waiting for me. Fiona Green. In spite of the harsh response I got, I greeted him with the utmost courtesy. Abel, without changing his expression, turned his head to a man who appeared to be his close aide to him. Geron, what the hell is going on here? That Geron man was a young man who appeared to be in his mid-20s. He looked at me once with a puzzled expression and turned to Abel back again. I've heard that Count Green sent a mage who was his immediate blood, but Geron too seemed to be at a loss for words, unable to make sense of the skinny kid in front of him. Well, that was not completely incorrect. I am a direct blood relative, although an illegitimate child, and I do know how to use magic. Abel gritted his teeth. Are you saying that the answer to the last order is this little kid? Abel then rose from the chair, his thick cloak fluttered. His expression grew darker, the longer he studied me. His blue eyes made me feel like I was trapped in a winter blizzard. At least, now, I can see, he thinks we're ridiculous. After this damn war, I will get rid of that Green family. Oh, I'm screwed, father. The strongest duke in the north must be very angry. But, honestly, I didn't care that much about what would happen to the Green family in the future. Rather, the main problem was I had to face Abel, who was on the verge of exploding in anger. Ugh, stop staring at me. The sound of Abel's shoes hitting the floor echoed as he walked towards me. The slow pace gave me a great sense of anxiety and pressure. In front of me, Abel stopped. His height towered over me, his tall person appearing even more so, in front of I, who was skinny and much smaller than my peers due to the lack of proper meals. I was a mouse in front of him. In order to meet his eyes, I was forced to raise my head to look back at him. Our gazes collided. Hey, kid. His expression was frost. Wait, I'm sure I said my name before, and I think it's a nice name. Abel, who gave his command, turned around without regret. For him, there was no time to invest in a useless thing. In his eyes, that was exactly what I was. I was a useless thing to him. I felt no sense of warmth from that cold appearance. But, I didn't care about Abel. I had nowhere to go. Count Green, who had sent me to the battlefield. I was treated so badly when I was there. My room was the old attic that contained no warmth, and the meal I ate was the leftovers from their meals. Even if I were to go back to that mansion right away, I was sure he'd kick me out because why would he waste the chance he waited so long to get? Plus, in reality, in the original story, Fiona, who had not yet been made aware of her talent, was kicked out of the Green family and forced to go to the streets. Fortunately, later she found a place to stay. However, the scars left by the world at this time were an important factor in Fiona becoming the villainess. Now, since I knew Fiona had a great talent sleeping in her body and skilled mages were treated well, I think I could have a better option: prove my talent early and build extensive knowledge in advance. I think this option was far better than being driven to the streets. After all, the war still would end with the appearance of the male lead. Until then, the best option to avoid my future despair was to bear this and save money. Then afterward, I could go down to the countryside and live in peace. So the first thing I had to do was get permission to stay here as a mage. Then, all I had to do was stay out of Abel's sight until the male lead appeared. After I calculated all the things in my head, I looked at Abel's back without any regret and calmly said, "Wait a minute, Duke. I have something to tell you." Abel stopped walking and turned around, glanced down at me. "What?" I couldn't follow that order. Abel frowned while looking at me. If I were an ordinary 13-year-old child, I might have cried. "What?" I looked up straight at Abel. "I'm not going back. But I'm not going to be stubbornly asking you to allow me to stay here. Just give me one chance at it to prove myself." Abel's pupils dilated. He was briefly shaken. "What are you talking about? An opportunity to prove my worth?" Abel's face changed as he took an interest in the idea I had just brought up. Well, of course, it was amazing that a girl who looked like an ordinary 13-year-old could say something like that. He spoke with a rough voice as if to scare me. "A little girl like you? Are you trying to do chores? But, I already have many excellent servants in this place. If it was not that, I wonder how you are going to prove the worth." It was not a difficult question. Besides, I had some knowledge of how to deal with Abel. Never carry yourself arrogantly, but do not go to the other spectrum and appear sloppy. I clenched my fists and said in a steady voice, "Just this once, let me go on the battlefield as a mage. I'll show you that I can be of sufficient help in this war. I promise you that you won't regret making this decision." I solemnly looked at Abel, hoping to convey my pleading sincerity. This was my only chance. Abel directed a startling glance towards Geron. The man had been standing next to the chair for a while. For a split second, the air was so silent, even a pin could be heard dropping in the spacious room. I sneaked a glance at his expression. This was truly nerve-wracking. I hoped that what I said did not come off the wrong way. The idea fleeted across my mind that I had some way or another offended him. I hadn't meant to sound proud, and I hoped he wouldn't kick me out. If he were to say, "What kind of nonsense idea are you telling me? An arrogant little kid like you?" I don't think I'd be able to fathom it. However, Abel threw a short chuckle. Unexpectedly, he then laughed hard. A low grumble turned into a belch. The sound of his joy resonating in the spacious room, as he bent over and held his head between his hands. "All right, that's the funniest thing I have heard lately. This cute kid. Not a bad idea." Cute, what did he mean by cute? Besides, I hadn't meant to be funny regarding my suggestion, I had truly meant it. Abel continued to talk. "I'll give you a chance with that reward. Let's see how you prove your worth." I looked at him. His face filled with a suspicious smile. It was like a predator's. A slight smirk, omniscient to the following events that would occur. Still, it was fortunate that the response I received was more favorable than I expected. When Geron returned, Abel was leaning against the chair, still in the hall. He stroked his chin and contemplated. The window distantly above allowed the light to hit his face, defining his sharp features. How was the kid? I have led her to the room. Abel let out a low chuckle. I couldn't tell whether she was arrogant or daring. He thought of the little girl who had moments ago stood before him. Anyone with a keen eye could tell that she was frightened by him. Nevertheless, it was hard to forget the sight of her courage. Her eyes had stared straight at him, as she firmly stood her ground. "I'll prove my value high indeed," what a very interesting phrase. But well, I'm afraid I don't need an incompetent person in my castle. Jiran, what do you think about that little girl? Abel felt slightly intrigued to hear his companion's opinion. Jiran's relaxed face shifted to a stoic, uneasy expression. It was all due to the look Fiona had on when he thought of her. Her absolute awe and admiration, at the small room that had been assigned to her, appeared like the largest luxury she had ever seen. The glow in her eyes revealed her youthful spark. He sighed. A feeling of pity could not help but rise within him. Such a young child had been forced to go to war. Well, compared to her peers of the same age, I admire her courage. She stood before you, and despite being intimidated, maintained her ground. I think she must be quite bright. But after all, isn't she just a mere child? Your decision to send her to the battlefield, are you certain about this? Jiran glanced at Abel, a conflict expression as he silently asked Abel to reconsider. Absolutely, she herself asked to go. If that attitude was just a bluff, and she ended up running away, I would personally grab her tail, and I'd send her back. Even though Abel had just said something like that, in all honesty, he didn't have much of an expectation. He had accepted her request, because to him, it was amusing. But, after all, she was only a child, who looked no more than 10. Therefore, how could he bring himself to have any hope for her? She was far too young, far too weak. After hearing such harsh words come out of his mouth, Jiran couldn't help but silently curse his boss in his mind. A string of criticism almost escaped from the tip of his tongue. You cruel, bloodless bastard. Never shed a tear of empathy. Jiran shot Abel a look of resentment whilst containing those thoughts. I can tell you're cursing me. Abel smirked. As expected, Jiran coughed lightly. In any case, for her age, she's indeed quite calm. It's rather unusual for a child of her age. I find it somewhat intriguing. Where did she come from? Being able to act so calmly and bravely, despite her opponent having the upper hand, she must have come from a rough place. I'm sure that there is a reason behind all of this. Let's do some research on the Green family. Abel drawled out a drowsy tone, as he leaned back against his chair in a relaxed posture. His long leg was crossed over the other. Additionally, I've been thinking about it for quite some time. That house, the Green nobles, they were unheard of. Uncover everything. To the dot. Don't even miss a single piece of jewelry they might be hiding in their warehouse. Abel instructed. Yes, sir. At his command, Jiran complicitly agreed immediately. Then, ding. 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 Could my fortune become any worse? The moment I had arrived at the second wall, accompanied by Abel, a loud bell pealed. The echo of the brass could be heard from miles away from the wall, traveling through the air to alert all those involved with protecting humankind to prepare. It was an announcement and a warning. The monsters were coming. You must be kidding me. A low whisper of shock and exhaustion escaped my mouth before I could take back those words. I realized there, unfortunately, was no time for me to rest and take a break after the rough, long journey to the second wall. Abel cunningly smirked at me. His smile was absolutely vicious. At that moment I doubted anyone could appear as wicked at him. Both seemed to be having fun? Seriously, his expression was really unfitting, and not appropriate at this time. There were monsters in his estate, ye'd had time to smile like that? Was a situation like this supposed to be taken lightly like a game? Do you not think that this is perfect timing? It's just the right time, kid. In contrast to his facial expression, which irked me greatly, Abel continued in a relatively neat tone. Let's see how worthy you are. I see, so his plan all along was to throw me into the middle of the pool of monsters wreaking havoc right now? Those ghastly creatures with faces of demons. Anyone would shiver upon hearing about them, and faint at the mere sight of them. Let alone, this man. He really wanted to chuck me into the scene, not willing to wait. It appeared as if I was a sacrificial lamb, an appetizer to sate their growing hunger and keep the monsters occupied for a while, in Abel's eyes. Well. Challenge accepted. I definitely will not lose. Fortunately, like most mages in the fantasy genre, in this world, the mages needed only to attack the monster from a distance to make critical hits. Since this was the first time I was here, at least I had to figure out what the range of the battlefield looked like. Without knowing a map of the terrain, it was hard to navigate. I had actually described it in writing, but seeing it with my own eyes was different. So I thought that the best way was to go up atop of the dusted limestone, allowing myself to gain a better view over the battlefield. From my surroundings, I observed what would be the best possible method to do so, and noticed a rustic-looking staircase leading to the high wall. I'll ascend the wall. It'll allow me to observe the range better. Trying to walk as fast as I could while I was a child was really tiring. Despite that, I forced my short little legs to keep up the pace and climb the immense blocky stairs. It was like at any moment, the stairs would collapse from their age. No one would be willing to come out here to maintain them. The amount of stairs appeared to be infinite, as shortly after, I started to pant real hard. Behind me, Abel smoothly followed, without uttering a breath of complaint. It appeared, he intended to keep an eye on me. After all, why go to the effort despite it not appearing to be much effort for him, of following me and not leaving, huh? I took a huge gulp of the cool air as soon as I reached the top of the high wall. At this altitude, the air was rather thin, it was clean and crisp and made it somewhat difficult to breathe. Regaining my breath, I looked down at the battlefield after stabilizing myself. There were many monsters on the battlefield. Some of them were monsters that were several times larger than the size of an adult. I saw some soldiers kill those monsters with a sword, and the others held torches, and that lit the monsters on fire, thereby preventing its regeneration. That would explain the burning stench I had smelt before. However, the screams and hoarse cries that were asking for help, for a savior, could be heard from all directions. It was the thing that caught my attention the most. I witnessed an uncountable number of soldiers die in the midst of killing the monsters. The act of the killing spree of monsters that the soldiers were on was in itself a massacre for them. Atop, I also witnessed the scene of a soldier who was caught by a giant and smashed to the ground. The details were unclear, but I could guess that the soldier must have been crushed by the monster's enormous strength. Suddenly, Abel's voice rang in my ears. "Kid, how do you feel seeing the battlefield for the first time?" "It is the worst, is it not?" No, this battlefield was not the worst. The one who had made this scene was the worst. It was me. I am the worst. If you have realized that you have been stubborn and let go of your ego, you may go back. No. I refused firmly. Even if I were too scared, I couldn't sit still. All of this happened because of me. Since it was my fault, I had to take some responsibility for what was happening right in front of my eyes. Abel was surprised by hearing my voice firm in my refusal. He seemed even more shocked when I stretched my hand forward. From now on, I will start. In this world, magic allowed its users to control the elements, such as water, fire, air, earth, and light. Unlike other worlds, mages here didn't need to memorize spells as often. The standard for measuring the greatness of a mage was how much power they needed to utilize to cause a natural phenomenon. A great mage was regarded as one who could cause a huge natural phenomenon while using only a small fraction of their power. The standard for measuring the skill of a mage was their efficiency. Or rather, those mages who could control the elements with minimal effort were the most talented. Quickly, I got rid of the thought. I had to concentrate. If I were to lose focus, for even a second, the flow of air would be scattered. Slowly, I closed my eyes to center my mind. In the sky, far away, the air that I controlled converged in huge gusts and morphed into dark, riding storm clouds that seemed to cover the entire sky. Next to me, I could hear Abel's small murmur. Is that a storm? The dark clouds that I made mimicked a storm, but were slightly different. Although it wasn't exactly like the storm I had intended to make, it was similar enough to serve its purpose. There was a strange cry from the monsters. Perhaps, they too felt the sudden change of atmosphere. I could feel the electricity and energy crackling in the air all around me. The moment I could hear the hum of lightning as the dark clouds grew closer, I opened my eyes for an accurate aim and unleashed the energy. Bang! The blindingly bright strike of lightning from the dark cloud hit the giant close by. Although it was a large and dangerous monster, it was a good target for me. Since that giant wasn't the only one on the battlefield, I hit every giant I could see. If they did not fall from the initial strike, I hit them twice, thrice times, as much as necessary. Relentlessly, I kept attacking. Boom! Yuwa! Every time a giant fell, the soldiers cheered and the monsters grew more terrified. Indeed. I heard Abel murmur briefly from his place beside me. By the time most of the giants on the battlefield had fallen, Abel suddenly lifted me up. I quickly grasped onto his broad shoulder, frightened and disorientated at the sudden change in altitude. As I turned my head in his direction, I was met by his icy blue gaze. Amazing. It's like the punishment of God. He muttered in an admiring tone. I turned my sight to the battlefield again. Under the dark clouds, the lightning that appeared along with the thunderstorms struck down the battlefield towards the bay. Does it really look like that to Abel? This is the first time I've actually seen a mage use such a skilled. You are a human, aren't you? Of course. Well, I'm the final boss in the future. Haha. I suppose so. When I looked down, my eyes met with the soldiers who were staring blankly at me. I smiled awkwardly and waved my hand while still in Abel's arms. Soon enough, I felt embarrassed. I looked like a child. Well, it couldn't be helped. Fiona's appearance was obviously childish since she was young. Afterward, as if it were all arranged, loud cheers erupted from every direction as if bidding farewell and victory to the soldiers leaving to protect their home. Some people had even begun to clap their hands in excitement. It dawned upon me as I looked over the crowd, this was all in my honor. I snuck a glance at Abel for a moment, audaciously waving my hand in front of his face, asking for a reward. I passed, right? Abel only smiled lightly when he met my eyes. Subsequently, he put me down with a very courteous attitude, unlike his previous manner, before everything that happened today. Abel raised his hand and stroked my head lightly. Then, his low voice emanated above my head. Welcome to Highland, Fiona. I opened my eyes wide. It is an honor. He remarked. At that moment, my body relaxed, all the tension suddenly disappeared akin to a snapped rubber band. I could stay here. But, 1 second later, I realized something. Abel had called my name. Kid, kid, kid. All the times he had called me kid flashed through my mind. So all this time he knew my name all this time, but chose to call me kid repeatedly, on purpose. About a month had passed since I had successfully qualified to stay in the Highland Castle as a mage. About a month had passed since I had successfully qualified to stay in the Highland Castle as a mage. Also, because there were no other kids in this castle, all of the employees doted on me quite a bit. They gave me snacks whenever they met me. My pocket was always full of snacks and it made me look like one of the squirrels that perpetually hoarded food for the winter. Well, it wasn't just because I was the only kid. Abel had given a special order to all of the employees because of my waifish figure. He had commanded them imperiously. She's too small for a child of 13. Feed her. It didn't bother me a bit. Even the thought of delicious food brought me happiness. Jiran, come here, I'll give you candy. I placed a brightly colored candy in the middle of his palm while he was walking down the hall. Like a zombie, he appeared haggard and scrawny. He was so thin that I was absolutely sure hidden underneath the black fabric of his outfit, his ribs stuck out prominently, similar to a xylophone. It was clear that he must have been robbed by Abel just now. This poor aide. Oh. Thank you. Jiron smiled at me exhaustedly, the already deep wrinkles around his eyes growing extensively. I gave him a toothy grin. Where are you going? I'm headed to the fourth wall. I heard there was an attack this morning. Going over it once again within my mind, I felt a sharp pinch of annoyance. Then will you keep it a secret from the Duke? Of course, the fourth wall was the picture of devastation. Attacked since the early hours of the morning, a mixture of the corpses of both soldiers and demons littered the battlefield like flies. The air shimmered with heat as flames flew everywhere. The rancid stench of burning flesh rose all the way to the top of the rampart. It did not faze me much. Upon seeing this scene once again, I felt somewhat used to it. Jiron calmly weaved his way through the crowded battlefield, pausing at different groups of soldiers, asking them if there was anything they needed. Well, if I couldn't be next to him, I could do the same thing on my own. I could use my power to help the soldiers burn the remains of the dead monsters. As I drew closer, I recognized some familiar faces. The soldiers from my last visit greeted me with a nod. Magician. I'll burn the body. After declaring my intention, I concentrated for a brief moment. With an elegant flick of my wrist, a hungry fire bloomed on a couple of the demon corpses dispersed nearby on the ground like dolls thrown carelessly in the midst of a temper tantrum. The soldiers standing witness to the sight drifted away to different directions after staring at me with eyes full of awe and respect. While I was searching for corpses of other monsters, my eyes saw a body that was unusually smaller than other soldiers. No way, is that a child? When I got close, the figure seemed to be that of a young boy, roughly around my age. He lay curled up on the ground unmoving. From the lack of a uniform, instead clothed from head to toe in plain black, it was evident that he wasn't a soldier, but rather a mercenary. I was scared speechless aside from the terrifying scream that tore itself from my throat. My knees felt like jelly as I collapsed to the hard ground. My mind replayed what had happened over and over in my mind. The body had made a sound. I braced my palms on the earth below me, still slightly damp with blood. I didn't know dead bodies could respond to someone in this world. Sure enough, this world was different and fantastical. Realization suddenly dawned upon me. Wait. He's not dead. This boy is still alive. As soon as I came back to my senses and comprehended that the boy still breathed, I shouted for help, asking for anyone that could aid me. Over here, there's a survivor. After shouting urgently, while waiting for the soldiers to come, I examined his body. It seemed like he had an injury on one side of his abdomen. So, I managed to turn his body around, making sure to be slow and careful. Fortunately, the boy's eyelids were fluttering and opening slowly. He was conscious. I patted the boy on the cheek and spoke to him in a quick but calming tone. Can you hear me? It should be okay now. Don't panic, I'm here to help you. Who are you? His blue-gray eyes peered up at me unfocused. Optimism grew within me like a flower in fertile soil. If he displayed consciousness to this extent now, there was a good possibility of his survival. He might live. The thought echoed around in my head like the ringing of a bell. Despite being stained with blood and dirt, the boy appeared beautiful upon taking a closer look. He had hair as dark as a shadow and blue-gray eyes that, although blurry due to his injuries, reminded me of the rain before a thunderstorm. He was undoubtedly attractive. He must have been even more so when he was healthy. Why was a pretty child like this here of all places? I could have sworn I had seen him before. Although this seemed to be my very first time meeting him, he appeared somewhat familiar. I couldn't exactly put my finger on it. At that moment, the boy suddenly looked over my shoulder, his eyes widening like saucers. Danger. His rough and disused voice croaked out. I finally snapped out of my reverie, looking at him quizzically. Magician. Dodge. I turned around at the same time the soldiers yelled, my head snapping to attention as I heard my title being bellowed from across a lengthy distance spanning the battlefield. However, before the events could even properly register in my mind, the boy's hand suddenly shot out and reeled my arm in towards him. Unprepared his action and the strength behind it, we rolled over to the side. Boom. A heavy noise resonated through my ears, causing my head to ring slightly. The sound had shaken the air seconds after we had rolled over, barely escaping its radius. Guessing from the sound, a collision took place around the area that we were. I gazed at the spot I had been crouched moments ago, dazedly. Still a little overwhelmed from the sudden attack, I clumsily pushed myself up from my place, draped over the boy's chest. I stared down at him, my wide eyes darting around his face in utter shock. I couldn't fathom where his sudden strength came from. After all, just moments ago, he seemed as if he was on the verge of death, unblinking, unmoving, and already as pale as a ghost. Despite all of that, this boy still managed to save both of us. Ah. I looked over the boy once again, this time paying attention to various details with keen eyes. Old clothes presumed to be a commoner's, dark hair like the midnight sky and misty blue-gray eyes. At first, I didn't recognize him because of his dusty appearance and his age being younger than I had expected. However, it was clear as crystal now. Isn't this the main male character, Sigren? Why is he here? Wasn't he supposed to be introduced 6 years later, at the start of the original story? Why has he appeared before my eyes right now? Does he meet Abel around this time? Why? The thoughts weaved in and out of my brain before becoming tangled in a flash. This entire predicament seemed like one giant Gordian knot. My knowledge about the novel's events was useless in this situation. Honestly, I didn't know much about this period because I had never written it myself. The story which I wrote began 6 years later. I was absolutely clueless about what had happened in this world before that, and hence, every action I've taken up till now was purely guesswork. Stop. I need to stop thinking about this, stubborn brain. This is the worst time to be thinking about this. Sigren was the male protagonist of my magnum opus and a hero who would save this world. Additionally, that very man was dying right in front of my eyes. His death would mean the end of all hope. It would be a crisis of apocalyptic proportions. On that note, I noticed that all the blood that had traced his wounds had disappeared. Please call paramedics here soon. I screamed in desperation. Then, the door of my room swung wide open and someone's silhouette was framed in the doorway. The tall figure drew closer. For a little girl like you, as small as a mouse, it's still 100 years too early to bring a man to her room. Come on, look at him. He's not a man, he's just a kid, and an injured one at that. I replied as I turned to level a skeptical look at the newcomer. The way he had stalked towards us earlier was reminiscent of a hunter shadowing its prey. It is exactly what I said it is. My eyes do not deceive me. Honestly, this man. The situation is completely different than what he thinks it is. Anyway, what brings you here? Why else do you think I'd be here? It's because of him, of course. Abel raised his index finger and pointed towards Sigren with that irritating expression still plastered across his face. He was injured to such a severe degree that I had him treated in my room for a bit. Abel briefly glanced at Sigren, eyes peering down upon where he lay in my bed, sickly and pale. Where do you belong to? I don't think you're a child of our manor. What was he talking about? This was young Sigren. What did he mean belong to? Then I remembered, of course, Abel didn't know. I had never thought about this matter seriously, so I never wrote this scene. When I quietly looked away, Sigren answered. Carl Mercenary. Mercenary Corps? Abel raised his eyebrows slightly, as if finding his response to be unexpected. Is there a kid like this with the mercenaries these days? TSK, that is not what we are supposed to talk about anyway, I whispered softly to Sigren's ear to help him understand the situation. He is the Duke of Highland, Duke Abel Highland. Sigren, hearing what I said, looked alert. Seeing this, I gently rubbed the frown forming between his brows to tell him to relax. However, Sigren quickly backed away with a stiff face. Don't. At that time, Abel flicked my forehead. Hey! Little kid. It's still 100 years too early. He's just, dash. Before I could finish my comment, Abel suddenly lifted me up. He was always like this. It was like he preferred this way to hug me. Many, no, I think all of the passersby laughed and said you two look like father and daughter. The fact that we had the same silver hair made it seem all the more true, so it was understandable. As he lifted me in his arms, I made eye contact with him and asked, by the way, can he stay here until the wound heals? At my request, Abel had a complex look. I don't really like what you're asking me to do, but alright, I'll give him a room so he can stay here until his wounds are healed. I clasped my hands in shock. Frankly speaking, I wasn't expecting anything. Wow, you're giving him a separate room? Then, you're going to use the same room together? Abel answered my question with a blank look on his face. When I turned my head, Sigren's face was a little red, but then. What? Do you think you are that fine? Abel kicked his tongue lightly, that's fine. You've done enough. I tilted my head. Recently, Abel's attitude had softened a lot, although his arrogant tone had not changed. However, because of his ambiguous behavior, I couldn't tell whether it was a good thing or not. I hope it was not a sign that I would be kicked out. Eventually, the room got quiet and I sighed. One little sigh, Abel grumbled seeing me. I gave him a blank look. Hey, I've got a problem too, and it's really hard, very hard. Sigren's mother, Carla, had cared for her son until the moment she died. You have to live, Sigren. That short sentence bound itself to him, becoming something almost like a curse. Because of those words, he couldn't give up his life and had barely managed to escape from the people who tried to kill him. Of course, it was a life that was difficult to live. For a 10-year-old boy, while trying to escape from death, he also had to worry about eating and living. Fortunately, he entered the mercenary corps to do chores, so he could avoid starving. But that was the only fortunate thing. Living there wasn't easy. He entered the mercenary corps that had the roughest personality among the mercenaries. Sigren was assaulted due to rage many times, sometimes for no reason. Those with a really bad temper hurt his skin with the cigarettes they smoked. Sigren's body was filled with small scars from it since he wasn't properly treated. However, he endured silently. All again, it was because his mother's wishes rang clearly in his ear. Nevertheless, amidst the repeated pain and loneliness, a question rang in his mind. I have to live. But what the hell do I live for, you bastard? You're not even worth it. You have nowhere to go, just take it. I took you, but you're a complete useless. The reality was cold. The treatment towards an orphan boy who could only do chores was worth nothing more than a toy. The mercenaries threw harsh words, knocked him over the floor, and ruthlessly hit him with their fists and feet. Others, who at least didn't participate in the senseless violence, did nothing to stop their actions. They just watched with a heartless gaze. He had always lived in such an environment. In a world without even the slightest sympathy, far from favorable. Not a day went by where new bruises didn't form on Sigren's small body. After all those years, the mercenary corps which Sigren belonged to had to defend the Highland territory. The fight against monsters was obviously dangerous, but the payment was great. Sigren, who didn't even receive a proper weapon, survived the fight against monsters with the sword of someone had picked up on the battlefield. The endless fight was tough, but there was one good thing. The battle over life and death made him stronger. However, that one battle. The onagers were broken. One of the mercenaries who always had bothered Sigren pushed Sigren through to the middle of monsters. You are so useless. Go, be a human shield. And that mercenary escaped through the gap. Sigren was skilled to endure with his life. However, no matter how much his skill had improved, the 14-year-old boy was still not strong enough. Eventually, he was deeply cut at his abdomen and passed out due to exhaustion. Is this my end? He was relieved at the thought that it was finally over. One thing that he felt was unfortunate was that he was going to die on behalf of such crap. The mercenary who pushed Sigren was the guy who had the worst temper. There were people who needed more help than someone like that. He wanted to reach out to the weak. Because no one helped him when he was alone. At least, he wanted to help. He knew it was a weak mindset that he didn't want anyone to live like him. The world he lived in was in a place where one must exploit someone to go up, but he didn't want to be that kind of person. As a result, he was beaten like a livestock every day and finally met his end. Yet, still, even a little bit, he wanted to believe that his wish was not in vain. There must be a light somewhere, or he could be the light for somebody. But it's impossible now. Soon after, Sigren closed his eyes. In the darkness, someone gently stroked his head. It was a kind of touch that he felt for the first time in a long time. It was so comfortable that he could almost cry. Then, when he opened his eyes, Sigren saw a girl asleep at his side in a room full of sunset glow. Silver hair spread out gently on the edge of the bed and glowed in the sunset. It was the most peaceful sight in his tired life. "Your wound, is it okay now?" I stretched my hand towards Sigren's wounds. "Don't touch me as you please," he snapped as usual. I gave him a little sullen look at the snappy response that was still as cold as ever. Indeed, it was really hard to be acquainted with him in the villain's body. "If you're still in pain, you need to tell me even if you don't like me." Hearing my words, Sigren looked at me like he saw something strange. I felt that these days, he often looked at me like this. Am I that weird? He opened his mouth reluctantly. "You are weird." "What?" Sigren then said in a sarcastic tone. "Why do you care so much about me? Is it the compassion of a young lady raised in the castle? Like the pity of picking up a dog or a cat in the rain?" "It's not like that." "Why not? Just because I wanted to save you? Just after one meeting? With no reason?" "Right. You might have thought of it too." In that 6-year later period, Sigren was well-defined in many ways. So, I'd roughly assumed it was the effect of his childhood. Thus, I was spitting on the thought that there might be such a side to my intentions. Unexpectedly, Sigren's expression was firm. "I have never done that. People like you, who grew up fine, are the ones that like to think that kind of thing." At this point, I was starting to feel nauseous. What the heck, I was definitely one of the fighters. I was not the girl who lived well in a castle. "Wait. Sig dash. I'm simply staying here because. May I come in?" Someone knocked on the door. It was the voice of the healer who had examined Sigren. "Come in." Then, a gentle grandfather-looking came into the room. "You're here today, Lady Fiona?" "Yes, hello." The elderly gentleman was in charge of the health of the people in the castle. Because he was fairly old, he treated me as his own granddaughter. "You must be getting close quickly because you are the same age." Ha ha ha. It was needless to say that this caused Sigren to frown at his words. He looked at me and said coldly, "You've got to get out of here. I wonder if your wound is healing well. Could I stay here?" "You? I'm glad you didn't faint when you saw the wound." Sigren was cynical and said again, "Get out quickly." "I can't change my bandage because of you." I was curious about his condition, but at this point, I couldn't help it. Sigren had to take off his top to change his bandage. He might be ashamed to take off his top in front of a girl of his age. At that time, the grandpa healer came out of the room. It seemed the treatment was over. "Is it over?" "Yes, but the grandpa healer's face was dark." "Was Sigren in a bad condition? Is there any problem?" "No, the recovery from injury is going very well." "But," Grandpa Healer said hesitantly. I grabbed him by the sleeve of his clothes and hurried him. "What is it? If it's about Sigren, just tell me." At my words, the Grandpa Healer glanced at the door of the room with a sign of sympathy. "I heard he was from the mercenary corps. But I wonder if it's okay if he goes back to there after everything goes better." He didn't tell me anything, but all over his body. The more I listened to the Grandpa Healer, the stiffer my neck became. I felt like I heard a story that I shouldn't hear. My heart pounded with shock. I rushed into Sigren's room. Sigren, who was drinking water, looked at me and put the cup on the table in a hurry. I walked towards Sigren's bed in a dash before grabbing his collar tightly. What? The embarrassed Sigren tried to jerk back, but it didn't work. I'm sorry. I'm going to pull off your clothes for a moment. What? What are you talking about all of a sudden? I pushed his shoulder to the bed before Sigren finished grasping the situation. Since he was embarrassed, he fell back easily. Subsequently, I climbed very lightly on top of his wound so that he didn't feel any pressure. I pulled off the clothes and asked for his understanding once again. At the shocking sight that opened right in front of me, my body became stiff in the moment. I didn't mean to freeze up, but the fact that I had was painfully clear. Then Sigren shouted loudly. I told you to stop. I felt a strong force pushing my shoulders. My body helplessly fell off the bed. Ah. Sigren, who'd pushed me away, looked perplexed. He alternated looking at his hands and towards me, who was now sitting on the floor. What? You're like a feather. Why are you being pushed so easily? At that moment, tears fell from my eyes. Seeing that, Sigren hurried off the bed and sat next to me. Hey, did you get hurt from falling? I shook my head silently. The floor was carpeted, so it didn't hurt. But Sigren carefully stroked my head as he was trying to soothe me. No, don't cry. Talk to me. Where is the pain? Shoulders? Legs? No, it shouldn't be like this. I'll call the healer quickly. Sigren stood up as if trying to call the grandpa healer, but before he could go, I grabbed his shirt. I felt his gaze looking down in an uncomfortable position. He got more restless as I cried. Your wound, who did it? Sigren's face was hard on my question. Did you hear from the doctor? Did you try to take my clothes off just to check it? I nodded a small nod. Sigren ruffled his hair roughly. What? That's why you cried. I told you to stay out when I took off the bandage. Now you're crying on your own? I reached out and embraced him. I asked quietly in his ear. Why did that happen? Sigren replied bluntly. Not a big deal. Many mercenaries are tough, and am the youngest and weakest, so I am the target. Subsequently, Sigren snapped his body back. I relaxed my arms and met his gaze. Sigren, don't say it's not a big deal. Are you pitying me? I slowly shook my head. This wasn't a feeling of pity, it was one of guilt. Sigren, I'm sorry. Sigren laughed at the change of my incomprehensible attitude. You're apologizing for undressing me, are you? It's not like that. The tears that I thought had stopped started to shed again. Sigren wiped my tears with his sleeve while lightly clicking his tongue. Don't cry. It's not even your business, why are you crying? His touch as he wiped away the tears was very careful. As expected, he was a sweet kid. Sigren. What now? I reached out and carefully held Sigren's cheeks with my fingers. Due to my sudden action, those blue-gray eyes shook helplessly. I whispered to him, as if it was a spell, I won't hurt you. Perhaps Sigren's wounded heart would not heal until the heroine shows up. But until then I will protect him. I don't want him to be wary of me anymore. With such a small wish, I laughed bashfully. So let's be friendly. Sigren opened his eyes wide as he finally came to his senses. Then he immediately murmured, avoiding my gaze. You cried on your own, now you're laughing, you're doing whatever you want, you. His face didn't seem to hate what I said. So, I decided to put some hope on it. Yes, we should be good friends. Since then, I have gotten somewhat closer to Sigren. I hope it's not just my imagination. Well, at least he didn't ask me not to touch him like before. I thought it was a good development. Moreover, I now understood that since Sigren had been subjected to such persistent abuse in the first place, it was natural that he was sensitive towards any stranger's touch. And now that I think about it, Sigren seemed to have prevented me from touching his scar even more. It would hurt. I told you, don't move. I slightly slapped his shoulder, to which Sigren refuted with a look of injustice. This is fine. I'm almost cured. No, you don't know when you're well. Listen to this older sister. Sigren chuckled at my nagging. I've been wondering since before. Hmm? You keep calling yourself older sister, honestly, how old are you? That question was, I swallowed my saliva. Honestly, at physical age, I was a year younger than Sigren. I answered back with a small voice. 13 years old. Surprisingly, Sigren did not get angry. On the contrary, he spoke in a rather muted tone as if he had anticipated it. That's more than I thought. I thought you were about 10 years old, I was a year older anyway. Mentally, I will be more. Sigrid snorted. You must be the only one who thinks that way. The Duke of Highland is feeding you so much. What the hell is up with your body that's not getting bigger? That's true. In fact, I was also poor in physical strength. Because of that, even though my magic power was good, it couldn't be used for long periods of time. In terms of running, it was similar to being strong in short distances and not being able to travel long distances. In other words, it meant lack of endurance. It's okay, because I'll grow a lot more in the future. At my positive words, Sigren laughed. Yeah, grow up well. I glanced at his face. Sigren, whose condition had improved and the atmosphere around him was more relaxed, shone like a tasserie. He was my kid, but the face I was really looking forward to he would grow into a few years later. This kid, used that shining beauty for the female lead. Have I got something on my face? Huh? No, then why are you staring at me like that? You're so handsome. Oh. And also, later, make sure to keep good principles in your relationship. No matter how handsome you are, I will not let you go if you make the eyes of the female lead shed with tears. Sigren was silent for a moment. Then he said, I always think, but sometimes you really know, forget it. Why? Sigren laughed mischievously and disheveled my hair. I don't know who you're telling me whose mental age is higher. You don't even know how scary people are. I looked at him. It was really unfair. I really was older than him. No, I'm not. I'm really. Lady Fiona. Suddenly, the door burst open, and at the same time, Sigren's hand fell off my head quickly. It was Geron who came in a hurry. It is reported that a giant monster is approaching the wall. I think we need to gather all the soldiers now. All right. I'll go right away. After a long time, it seemed that the monsters had entered the castle walls. It was reported that it was on a massive scale. It was time to work, so I got up in a hurry. What are you talking about? Why would you go there? Sigren grabbed my wrist and asked urgently. He looked like he couldn't understand the situation. Ah, really? I haven't told him I was a mage in the war yet. I'm a battle mage here. The main thing that I need to do is to protect the second wall. After answering his question, I looked towards Sigren with a look that asked for his understanding. Yet, he still didn't let go of his grip on me. Sigren, let go of my hand. It can't be. What, Sigren? I called his name as though trying to hold him back. What would he do if Geron kicked him out? However, I understood a little why he was angry. Sigren was basically a character with a sense of justice. What? I'm fine, don't mind me. What? Aren't you scared? I have nowhere to go unless I am here. I need a place to live, and Highland needs a mage. You don't need to be angry, when after all we're just working together when needed. I said it. He didn't need to be angry. He didn't have to judge their conscience by criticizing them for sending me to the battlefield. It was my decision to stay here in the first place. I needed a place to rely on until I was old enough, and Highland needed a strong wizard. Then, what about your family? There was nothing to stop that question, and I couldn't hide it anymore. I'm an illegitimate child. My father and brothers sent me here. Inevitably, a cold voice sprang out. I hope you never go back to that house again. Speaking of this, Sigren was the one who was able to grasp all of my position. We had grown up with a similar experience. You could die. Aren't you scared? If I die, it means that I wasn't competent enough to survive the fight. Anyways, I'm here by my own choice, so don't mind me. I don't care. Sigren's expression reflected that he was at a loss for words. You are so kind and worried about me. What the hell is the reason? I answered with curiosity. I should be worried because you're hurt. Sigren looked even more confused. However, he didn't hold my wrist anymore. Come back quickly. He just stared at me with complicated eyes. I waved lightly at him. When I came out, Abel stood in front of the room. When did he come? Did he hear the conversation? Abel looked at me with a firm gaze. Is he angry? Is he annoyed to see me arguing with a boy my age? However, we had to hurry and I really didn't need his nagging. I'm sorry. I'm late. At my apology. Abel simply pressed his lips together as though wanting to say something but instead just lifted me up with a sigh as though had given up. Abel's blue eyes stared at me as though trying to see through me. I laughed awkwardly at Abel. Why? Is the situation really bad? Forget it. I'm not telling you now. Fiona. I answered obediently. Yeah? When you arrive on the battlefield, you must not fall away from me. This was a remark that didn't have to be confirmed. Abel always carried me around when we went out to the battlefield. Okay, several days had passed since the report of the attack on the second wall. Of course, I'd done my job properly with keeping it safe. Am I that weird? By this point, Sigren's wounds had also healed, which was a good thing. However, we ran out of excuses to keep him at Highland Castle, but at the same time, I was uncomfortable sending him back to the fourth wall. There would still be mercenaries who bullied Sigren. As I had decided to protect him till the beginning of the original story, I couldn't turn a blind eye to this problem. What should I do? Lady Fiona. A maid called for me as I walked down the hall. Yes? The Duke called you to the office. I knocked on the door of Abel's office. Come in. As soon as I received permission, I opened the door to step inside. Abel was sitting at the desk and skimming through the pile of stacked documents. What did you call me for? It will be a long conversation, so sit down first. I quietly sat in the chair opposite him. Fiona. Abel rarely called my name. I heard from the healer that the little guy you took in is healed. Yes. Was he going to kick him right away? I still hadn't decided how to deal with mercenaries who bullied Sigren. As you know, I am not a person who likes to keep strangers in my castle. Of course. And am wondering whether you knew the identity of the boy when you brought him here. Seemed like Abel had checked Sigren's background, which meant he now knew Sigren was a prince. I straightened out my expression as best as I could and pretended that I had no idea. Sigren's identity? I'm not sure what you're talking about. All I've heard is Sigren has been doing chores in the mercenary corps. Yes? Wait, why is the topic changed to me? But well, of course, there's no girl like me. Haha. Fiona. I don't know what is inside your head. Sometimes you look like a child of your age. At some point, you're more rational and cold-blooded than anyone else. I really don't know what your personality is. I think it's normal. Then Abel said in a soft voice. It must be your own thinking. Is this what a genius child is like? In fact, I was deeply concerned about whether I should be wary or willing to consider your existence. It's good to have both a strong and competent aide. But, if it's more than anyone else, it's gonna be a double-edged sword. Wait. Why is he chasing me down? It's very unfair. I'm working hard. I shrugged my shoulder at the remark. Abel pulled out some papers and began to read with a lazy attitude. There is a petition filed by people of the fourth wall. Some of the mercenaries used violence against the people and harassed some women. Abel handed me the documents he was holding. I scanned the papers I had received. The content was the same as he told me. However, there was an unusually familiar word. Karl Mercenary Corps. It was the name of the mercenary corps to which the mercenaries who harassed people of the fourth wall belong. It was also where Sigren belonged to. I looked at Abel, who smiled lazily at me. He must have noticed my recent troubles. That was why he'd handed me this case. I can't believe those shits dared to touch my people in the land I protect. But, I do like to say, that stupid courage alone is a gift. Even though he was smiling at me while saying that, there was an underlying tone of annoyance laced in his voice. Then he continued. Of course, I have no intention of letting go of this matter. Abel laid his long legs on the desk and leaned his back on the chair. And with a smile on his face, he pretended to slit his neck. For your information, I don't need a bunch of bullies in my territory who can't control their fist and their legs. Go see and end it. Really, I wish I could learn to make that kind of expression. In a good mood, I answered him with a clear voice. I will take care of it. Currently, they were on the way to the fourth wall. His wound was healed and he should go back to where he was. Fiona pointed out the window and said, Sigren, look over there. Someone is making a snowman. Shall we make it later? Why do you want to do with that? Fiona pouted her lips at Sigren's disdain. Why are you so blunt when you're still young? It's snowing outside, show your childlike side more. It's better to be blunt than wander around without speed like you. Oh my. Are you still upset because I didn't tell you in advance that I'm going to the battlefield? Upset? Who is upset? Sigren made an uncomfortable expression seeing Fiona like that and eventually said in frustration, how about we make it later when you have time? After all, you have to finish the work that the Duke asked you to do in the fourth wall first. Fiona smiled broadly at what he said. Great. It's a promise then. Let's hang out together after I finished the Duke's order. Thinking about Fiona, Sigren still couldn't believe that the little girl in front of him was a full-fledged mage. He honestly couldn't imagine her as a mage, maybe because he had never seen her fight. Fiona had the appearance of a winter fairy in a fairy tale. Silver hair as white as snow, like a cozy winter, and red eyes like roses that just bloomed in early summer. Except for the slightly reddish cheeks, her skin was so white that she looked pale. Maybe because the appearance of her generally looked white except for her eyes, her atmosphere was a little unrealistic. Whenever Sigren saw her, he felt like she was a white rabbit running around in the snow. Was this really a mage who defended the most dangerous wall, the second wall? This little girl? Sigren was angry. He was angry at those who threw her away and drove her into this deadly situation. Sigren couldn't comprehend why she always worried about him. There would be no benefit in taking care of the mercenary's orphan boy. Whenever he tried to think of the reason for her behavior, he became wary of her. Perhaps she knew that he had the blood of the imperial family. Perhaps she was approaching him intentionally to use and kill him. However, every time this happened, he didn't like the feeling. He wanted to trust her. Yet, at the same time, she was unreliable. If he were betrayed by the one with whom he gave his heart, he would not able to handle the misery. Sigren. Sigren suddenly woke up from his thought at the sound of calling his name. What? I have question about mercenaries. What is it? How are the rules determined among the mercenaries? I mean how to control them. Basically, it's simple. The law of the jungle. The weak are the prey of the strong. The very bottom of the ladder of the mercenaries is the kids. They're the most worn out. I see. Fiona nodded once. It was the type of the strong bully the weak. However, it was more natural, because power was everything. As she was expected, it would be better to have a stronger punishment. So that the others who lacked understanding could understand at once. But why are you asking this? Huh? Oh, the Duke ordered me to do that. Fiona smiled innocently. I don't know much about mercenaries, so I ask you. The moment Sigren was about to ask more, the carriage rattled and stopped. They have arrived at the fourth wall. We're here, Fiona shouted as if she had been waiting. Sigren immediately opened the door of the carriage and lightly restrained Fiona, who was about to jump. This carriage is rather tall. You could fall. Then he proceeded to get down first from the carriage and reached out to hold Fiona's hand. Hold it and come down carefully. Fiona's eyes opened widely for a while at Sigren's unexpected consideration, but soon she burst into a small smile. Subsequently, Fiona slid down her little hand over the palm which Sigren gripped that soft hand tightly. Just so that this little girl did not fall. Fiona Green was a strange girl who showed favor to an unfamiliar boy. And Sigren was still wary of that point. He simply had yet to believe the act of her friendliness and kindness without knowing her reason. However, he had to repay them. Although he did not know how, he tried to do even a small act like this in hope that maybe, little by little, someday, he could pay her back. He hoped it would be this case since she used to have such a weak expectation of her life. "Thank you for holding me, Sigren." Yes, however, seeing her smile, suddenly, he thought he wanted to be a kind person. "Is this true?" The captain of the guard looked alternately at the letter of attorney and my face. "The seal of the Duke is stamped in there. It's absurd. Kid, go home and stop talking nonsense." Some of the soldiers resting at the post guard laughed at me, and some even threatened me. This amount of arrogance was nothing for me. However, honestly, I was thinking to exercise my skills a bit. After I said that to the captain guard, he looked closely at the document I gave him. Then he seemed to have realized that the document was real, not some kind of manipulation or anything. "Yes, this is definitely a real one, my lady," the guard responded with a disheartened face. "Yes, could I call you, Lady Fiona?" "Perhaps. Does Lady Fiona know what the unpleasant thing?" "Of course I know. I'm familiar with everything the document. If you don't believe me, I can recite everything in there." The guard captain quickly waved his hand with a heartburn face. "No, no, please. First of all, we need the help of the soldiers to arrest criminals. Second, please gather the people in the village square. I'll proceed with the work there. Third." I turned my head and looked at Sigren next to me. "Sigren, do you know where the mercenaries I'm talking about usually gather?" "I know. They always gather at a tavern near the wall." "I see." I told the soldiers where the location of those people was. The soldier went out of the guard post with a disgruntled face. Even though they disliked my order, they had no choice but to follow it since I was sent by the Duke. Although I expected that I would not be trusted from the beginning because I was a child, it was still kinda hard. They would do the order and bring the criminals to the square, right? When I turned my head, Sigren looked at me suspiciously. "What? The Duke asked you to do?" "Well, Abel commissioned it, but the decision was mine and I felt like it would give a big impact here." Alas, I couldn't care less. I had no intention to go easy on them. In fact, the actions they did to the people of the fourth wall and Sigren were quite vicious. "I'm going with you." "What? Is it something I could not go?" "That it's not," I replied in a daze. "Okay then, it's decided." Wait, but if something was wrong, wouldn't there be a scene where minors couldn't watch? So I made a small gap with my thumb and index finger. "That it can be a little cruel," Sigren grunted with a very displeased expression. "Didn't you forget that I came from rolling down in the battlefield?" "I know," but Sigren sighed heavily at my hesitant attitude. "Fiona. That's not what I meant." Sigren was a little bit hesitant before he spoke quickly while blushing a little. "So what I want to say is, I could be the shield when we are traveling. Also, most of these people here are not in favor of you. And two are better than alone, alright? If you understand, let's hurry up and go." "Huh? Oh, okay. I didn't know what he implied, but he seemed to be worried. Or maybe not? Anyway, it didn't matter. Then I rushed after Sigren, who was a quick step ahead of me. As I walked along Sigren to the square, I contemplated Abel's intentions for this task. Of course, I knew Abel giving me this task to solve my problems. However, no matter what, to hand over the Lord's authority to a girl would raise others' suspicion, puzzled, surprise, doubt, ridicule. No matter how dull someone's nerves were, it was hard to ignore such a blatant gaze, especially for kids. Because at this moment, I felt very uncomfortable. What was right in front of me at the moment was more urgent. First of all, how to punish was the most problematic. In fact, the amount of punishment to punish these mercenaries who caused the incident was very important. It had to be a literal example. So it could be a warning that if someone did the same thing, they too would end up like this. Moreover, there were many foreign mercenaries at the fourth wall. If this went well, it could help to bring the town to justice. That was what human psychology was. However, this case could not be finished if it was not at that certain level. As expected, maybe cutting is the answer. I glanced at Sigren, who was walking next to me. Looking at him, I felt that I should have just told him to go back. Or maybe banish them out of the walls. The villagers then continued to open the way with a long face. Sigren glanced at me while grumbling. Aren't you upset with this situation? Being angry won't solve anything. Alright anyway, good speed. Even if he said that, Sigren stood beside me with a vigilant look. Wait. At the time, as soon as I heard a soft voice in the crowd, someone grabbed my hand. The person who caught my hand was a woman in her mid-20s. I couldn't see any hostility in the clear eyes that stared straight at me. She lowered her back and put herself at my eye level. Young lady, I don't know who made you take on such a rough job. They're not easy people. It was words containing pure worries without any pretense. It's fine. I laughed softly. Perhaps she wanted to give me at least a warning, because it seemed like to her I was just going without knowing anything. May I ask your name is? Charlotte. Thanks for your concern, Charlotte. I let go of Charlotte's grip gently. Seeing my resolute statement, Charlotte stepped back even though hesitation was still on her face. When I came out to the very center of the square, I saw 5 mercenaries held by the soldiers. Of course, they didn't wait calmly. Damn it. Let go of me. Huh. Without us, you guys would be the meal for monsters. To subdue one mercenary, almost 2 or 3 soldiers were used. Regardless of their ugly behavior, their physical strength seemed to be formidable. A mercenary who spotted me spit and shouted. What's up with that kid? There was also someone who was looking at Sigren next to me and grunted. What, there is also a thief? Are you still alive? Sigren stared at them quietly. I stood in front of them and spoke cheerfully. I came under the order of Duke Abel Hylan. Please stop doing meaningless resistance. What kind of little bastard are you dare to give me order? The man stood up and started yelling loudly that even his blood vessels was seen. You treated us like this, huh? I meekly gave up and moved the magic in the air. Boom. A lightning bolt fell right next to the mercenary who was running rampant. The mercenary fell down in shock for a moment. Well, everyone would also have the same reaction if a bolt of lightning struck right next to them. This. What is this? The mercenary muttered in embarrassment. I looked around at the audience and opened my mouth. Great. Everyone should also sit like this. Or you do not want? Next, I clapped my hand lightly continually. Boom. 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 A second away after each of my clapped hands, a small but threatening lightning bolt fell indiscriminately on the floor next to the other 4 mercenaries. Pieces of rock bounced everywhere. When I saw that the 5 mercenaries unintentionally the soldier also sit down, I smiled proudly. Be quiet, get down on your knees. I looked around and for some reason, the villagers in the plaza were also quiet. It was weird though, there was no need for everyone to shut their mouth. Sigren glanced at Fiona, who was a little far away. The girl literally struck a thunderbolt while the dry sky was calmly proceeding with the situation. So she was really the battle mage of the second wall. Sigren could finally see that fact in front of his eyes. She was also different from other mages. He had seen quite a few mercenaries who often boosted themselves as a mage. Even a sturdy mercenary would run away in surprise when a mage made a fist-sized fireball from their hand. As such, the existence of magicians who could create something from nothing or appear to be was quite threatening to the general public. And it was the first time Sigren saw a mage who could create such phenomena at a young age like Fiona. I think I know why Duke Hyland keeps bringing her. Before everyone knew it, she was reading the personal information and crimes of the mercenaries one after another in the documents she had. Her voice rang in the village square. However, as he now was back to the fourth wall, it seemed far-fetched for him to know the answer to this question. I don't know if I can see Fiona's face after this. She might find another kid since orphans like him were all over the place. Sigren looked up. So we'll give you two options. Fiona spread out her two fingers. The first choice is to get out from the wall naked. Her words were saying getting out, yet in fact, it meant nothing more than to kick them out. The second choice. Fiona pointed her index finger at an important part near the mercenary's pants and spoke cheerfully. Cut it. That moment, a tremendous heavy silence came down to the village square. Now the mercenaries' faces were not white but blue. Fiona tilted her head with a face like, "What, you did not expect this much punishment?" Sigren's expression was in the same manner. Well, they had no room for sympathy. Of course, I'm going to give you at least amount of mercy. Regardless of the atmosphere of the village square. Fiona clapped her hands and ended the conversation with a cheerful voice. So it's up to you to choose. Don't be ridiculous. Why do we have to be like that? This is why you shouldn't get along with barbaric and uncivilized northerners. We helped you all, but you treated us like this. Without mercenaries like us, you guys would have been shipped to the monsters. The villagers gathered in the village square murmured hearing those words. The remark was an insult to all the people living in the north. But, doesn't the Highland Duchy also pay the mercenaries a price commensurate with the risk? I replied nonchalantly, stating the truth. These people talked as if they were here truly to help North. I'm not trying to suppress mercenaries. I'm making you pay. Subsequently, I added calmly. The right price for your crime. Of course, the price was a method that fitted their case very well. If you continue to refuse to make a choice, I would choose randomly. As I finished pondering, I realized all of the people were strangely quiet, and I felt like, maybe it was just me, the ambient temperature seemed to have dropped by about 2 degrees more. Then a cold voice came from behind me. What are you going to choose? Looking back, I saw Abel stood with his arms folded. His expression showed he was not in a good mood, and as if in line with it, I felt like there was a cold wind sweeping continuously. Behind him was Geron, who looked at me with an apologetic expression. Duke, why are you here? Don't need a reason to visit my estate. Right. Abel asked me after lifted me up. From which part did you hear? Abel laughed furiously at my question. Just looking at that smile, I could see that he was in a foul mood. Finding a more comfortable posture, then replied, I told them to choose between two punishments. Going out of the wall naked or cutting their reproductive organs. I like both of them. Abel lightly stroked his chin. Then, why do you give them a choice? Abel raised the corners of his mouth coldly. It was a smile that made people flinch and step back, avoiding his gaze. Fiona, haven't I always told you? Abel approached the mercenaries while carrying me. As he got closer to them, their faces became paler. I don't need trashes, even the ones who dare to touch my people in my territory. Abel. Ah. Abel looked down at the mercenaries with the usual arrogant gaze. You dare to call the territory I ruled savages, then it would be impolite if it doesn't meet those expectations. Then he turned around, decisively ordering his men. Apply both punishment. Cut the body parts that doing the crime, then, kick them out of the wall. Yes my lord. Finally, Abel recited in a low voice. This is the northern way you called uncivilized. Start the execution. Yes. Haha, of course, he was worried about Miss Fiona. As I promised earlier, I was building a snowman with Sigren as I have some time left. Worry? I would rather trust the word that the world would be destroyed tomorrow than believing that. I responded honestly while rolling a ball of snow to make it as the head of the snowman. Well. It's understandable, His Excellency certainly is a twisted person. With a cloudy face, Geron unexpectedly spoke lightly about Abel. I know. Honestly, his personality is not that good. It's not just not that good. It's very bad. So, it's hard to understand him in many ways, but this time, he came because he was really worried. I don't think he had any intention of getting Lady Fiona to execute it from the beginning. Really? He's not here to monitor me? His Excellency does not entrust work to those who need surveillance from the beginning. Jiron, then bringing the body of the snowman he was rolling in front of me, then said, "The weather is cold. I'll get something hot to drink. And this, I'll hand it over to you, my lady." Saying that, Jiron walked towards the stall. I looked at his back for a moment, then turned my head to Sigren, who had been quiet all along. Sigren, who was staring at me from the side, suddenly opened his mouth. "Fiona." What are you going to do from now on?" "Well, I'll live as I do now for a while." Sigren shook his head slightly awkwardly. "That's not. It was then I realized that his behavior was different from usual. So I looked at Sigren. "If not?" Perhaps because of the cold, Sigren's face was a little red. "Will you go?" Are you going to come?" Unlike usual, Sigren's voice was so low that I couldn't hear it. "Sigren, what did you say? Forget it. I didn't mean to ask you to put you in trouble." "It's fine. I know you must have been simply sympathetic to me. I shouldn't have said that." I hurriedly grabbed Sigren's hand when he was trying to walk away. Why did he always like to jump to a conclusion however he wanted? "No, I'm not like that. And also, I'm definitely going to meet you." As I hold his hand tightly, Sigren's face flushed red. "Hand? My hand? I'll come every day." Sigren muttered, avoiding my gaze. "You don't have to do it every day. It's okay. I'm the one who asks you to be friend." I smiled brightly, "So, I'll definitely come to see you." Sigren's face stiffened with his eyes opened as if he had heard unexpected words. I just asked him let's be friend, why did he have such a face? The snow melted for only 1 or 2 months. And I hated it. Why the hell did I set up Highland as a cold region? It had been over 5 years since I came to Highland, and this never-ending snow never failed to make me struggle. Especially, when I had to fight in a snowy mountain for hours, every second of it, I complained endlessly. So cold. The soldier standing next to me had a parched face at my dreadful face. "Lady Fiona. Please focus on the battle. I'm concentrating enough." I flicked my fingers lightly, and a second later, the lightning bolt fell right next to Alan. "Don't worry about me, just look around calmly first." Alan, who fell down, looked at the place where the lightning fell with a white face. He now realized that there was a monster that had been trying to tear off his neck just until now, but it was dead. Seeing him so surprised that he couldn't even scream, I smiled brightly. "By the way, if you look away like that, you would become the monster's dinner." Alan's legs trembled at my words. Huh? He was scared more than I thought. Poor him, this amount of braveness would be the joke between the soldiers. As an encouragement, I placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled softly. "Don't be afraid. I'm here to protect you from that." Alan stared blankly at me. His cheeks were flushed red, probably because of the cold. Seeing him like this made me feel like he was a little younger than me. Lady Fiona, that was a huge head of a beast with fangs the size of my forearm. As it fell right in front of Alan, the blood dripped from the monster's neck, splashed and stained Alan's clothes and the snow. Alan, who was already surprised, was even more terrified by the shocking sight. This obviously was not something that could comfort him. Sigren. The pretty boy had shredded the youthful feelings he used to have. His eyes were sharp and cold like a hawk gliding in the blue sky. A well-made sword was held in his large and trained hand. The blood of the monster he had just cut was dripping from the tip of his sword. The hell, was he still in puberty? What was with the way he talked? Wasn't puberty ended when someone was 19 years old? When they reached adulthood? What's up with him? What do you mean what? If you startle people, you should apologize. Abel definitely told me to educate the newbies. If they were shocked just because of this, they were in trouble. Sigren replied with a sour face. He then looked down at Alan and smiled coldly. This is just the beginning. I slightly pushed Sigren, who repressed the soldiers with his eyes alone, on his chest. Fortunately, he flinched a little and then withdrew his gaze. Don't worry. I was just like you at first. But I quickly got used to it. You will able to do well soon. At what I said, a soldier raised his hand with a red face as if he was very nervous. You have any questions? I've heard rumors among the soldiers, there would be a selection for Lady Fiona's escort. That's right. If I work hard, will I be able to be selected despite I'm still a rookie? It was an unexpected question. Well, although most of the soldiers who escorted me were veterans, it was not unreasonable that these soldiers also want to be one of them. For me, it was a good thing to have a goal in anything. I'll be waiting. I smiled lightly to cheer him up. Yes, my lady. I'll do my best. How dare you make obvious tricks? For some reason, I heard Sigren's teeth grinding from behind. Seriously? He had to stop staring at the soldiers. What if they got discouraged again? Somehow, as the days go by, I felt like Sigren was becoming more like Abel. 5 years had passed since I came to Highland, and it meant there was not much time left until the beginning of the original story. Right now, I was 18 years old, and Sigren was 19 years old. Of course, in a few months, both of us would grow a year older. In these years, Sigren kept his childhood promise. Since he was learning swords from Abel as the original story flowed, he was now in a position where he could freely go in and out of Highland Manor. Now, no one dared to treat him badly due to his strength. In the meantime, I've been working hard to achieve my planned life, a peaceful life in my own way. I've been saving the big amount of money I received from Highland in exchange for protecting the walls and the money from selling the materials of the monsters I killed. Right now, my saving was quite a lot, to the point I had nothing to worry about making living for the rest of my life. I just had to see Sigren and Eunice walk on the golden path of the main characters, and spend a leisure life. The offer he talked about was the thing that interfered with my future plans. Abel leaned deeply into the backrest and smiled with his arrogant smile. Quickly, call me father. This. Abel's offer to me was to be his adopted daughter. I will decline. Have you even contemplated about that? Abel grumbled at my firm answer. How could someone say other people's future plans are absurd while looking at them? It was about seeing Sigren marry and have a good life, then me having leisurely retirement in a peaceful place. Heard Abel was mumbling like he pitied Sigren. I honestly didn't get it. Why did he say he felt sorry for Sigren? Fiona, the position, power, wealth, and honor that Highland has. Are you really not interested in all of these being yours? I'm not interested. I replied firmly. If I become your father, I would grant you everything you want. Wow, Abel as my father? Just thinking about it was. It's a lot of pressure. My straightforward words made Abel frown as if he were offended. You're so cold-hearted. I responded by shrugging my shoulders lightly. I won't ask you any more if you don't like it. Besides, you've done a lot of work for 5 years. I personally appreciate it. In worried tone I said, what are talking about all of a sudden? You don't have a disease, don't you? Of course not. I also felt embarrassed when I said that, but listen to me. You chose to fight the monsters at a young age. So, maybe, because of this, you are sick of Highland. The number of monsters had decreased significantly. There are also a lot of strong knights and soldiers, so it's not hard to defend. It was then that I vaguely understood what Abel was trying to say. So now you can go wherever you want to go, Fiona. You've just become an adult. You are free to do whatever you want. With the level of your magic skill, you would be able to enjoy all kinds of wealth and glory in the capital. If you're concerned about your position as an illegitimate child, I would protect you in the name of Highland. The capital would not treat you recklessly. That is unexpected. What? I didn't know the Duke would make such a kind offer. I'm just giving what you deserved. What do you think I am? The remuneration and that are different things. I just couldn't believe he was saying such a sweet thing, as he always spoke so dirty and harshly. Abel then searched his drawer, took out a letter, and handed over to me. What is it? It's a letter from your hometown. If it was hometown, then it was from Count Green. I've never sent a letter since I came to Highland. So, what has happened all of a sudden? We've never contacted each other before. Why did they send it? Well, I haven't opened it either. So, I don't know what it's about. Abel looked at me for a moment. If you want, I could destroy the home that pushed you here. He laughed languidly like a wild beast in the afternoon sun. Well, I'm not that vengeful. To be honest, I didn't even care. Abel nodded his head sullenly. I inadvertently grabbed the letter. Clearly, it was time for the original story to begin soon. It was time for the heroine to come out, and even more, if I was by Sigren's side for nothing, I might be distracted. Anyways, your suggestion, thank you. If you're so thankful, call me father. Abel didn't give up until the end. I refused. What a cold-hearted kid. I left the office with a grin at the sight of Abel's strange grunting appearance. Abel gave me the letter sent by the Green family, but apparently, I was not the recipient. I realized it was because of the unexpected content of the letter. The confirmation of my death? The letter contained the premise that I had died. The gist was, currently, my father, Count Green, was in a critical condition. Because of that, the family had to deal with the inheritance matters, and they asked Highland to send a document confirming the death of Fiona, the blood relative of the Green family. It seems they don't even think I'm alive in the first place. They despised me so much that they sent me out because they wanted me to die 5 years ago. What a consistent family. I casually threw the letter to the desk. To be honest, I wasn't even interested in the Green's inheritance. So, I didn't have to go since I had no business over there, and I had no obligation to see him on his deathbed. If the Green family knew I was still alive, then it would definitely give some stir. Maybe it would be better to just sign the memorandum of renunciation of inheritance first. Abel said it was okay to take revenge on the Green family, but I did not want to. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't kill them as they were nobles. An attempt to kill or seriously injured nobles was a bit big felony. The only way was to throw them into jail, which could impact me negatively. Now that I had saved as much money as I needed, and I was also a decent adult, all the factors that could limit my actions had disappeared. Fiona, are you there? Someone knocked on my door. It was a familiar voice. So I opened it and found Sigren was standing in front of my door. Sigren, come in. Sigren flinched at my words and shook her head lightly. Never mind. I'll talk to you here. Sigren and I were close enough that we liked to talk together on the bed a few years ago. But these days, because we grew up, he often acted awkwardly in this way. What brought you here? I heard from Abel. You should say teacher. Sigren put on a face of disgust expression on his face. It was kinda funny, but it was also kinda harsh. He didn't have to reject that strongly. Teacher said you might leave soon. Probably. Where are you going? Well, first of all, I got a letter saying my father is in critical condition, so we'll go to the capital. Even the person who abandoned you, you still regards him as a father. Well, it was really like that. To put it bluntly, it was because there was no proper name to call him. Then, will you come back after seeing him in his deathbed? No, I want to look around the capital city. Right. You've been in Highland for years, it was a good idea. So, when will you back? Then I realized Sigren might misunderstand something. Sigren, right now, I don't intend to come back. Why? For some reason, it felt like the questions and answers were spinning around at the same place. Is there a reason to be here now? I hesitated a bit and eventually took a few steps back. He then grabbed my shoulder and spoke in a low voice. You're going to leave? Uh-huh. Don't answer me with a How can you decide that so quickly without saying a word? The Duke said I'm now an adult, so he told me to do what I wanted to do? Sigren mumbled harsh words towards Abel with his head bowed. If Abel heard it, he would immediately bang Sigren's head on the floor. You. Did you forget that we've been together life and death for 5 years? Sigren gritted his teeth. I'll write a letter to you. That is not the problem here. Sigren grabbed my shoulders and shook them slightly as he was trying to wake me up. Then, what's the matter? Everything, from 1 to 10. I looked at him and gently blinked. As he reacted so intently, I became calm. Sigren, are you thinking we'd be together forever? When I asked, Sigren looked strangled. We're both adults. No matter how close we are as a childhood friends, it's natural at one point of our life our road would split. Sigren laughed as if in dismay. You're too cold. Could you describe me as rational? Do you plan to stay in the capital all the time? I don't know. First of all, I just want to go somewhere warm. I hope he did not make a sad face. He was not a child anymore. Did he really believe that he would be able to spend time with me all the time? I felt it was just his response because he couldn't go to the capital. The capital was like the home that sought his life. It was Sigren's hometown, but it was also a place where he had to avoid at the same time. However, if it went according to the original, he could come to the capital anyway. I reached out and wrapped around Sigren's cheeks. Don't be sad, Sigren. Wherever I am, I will always be on your side. Tell me you need help. I would come to you. If I ask you to stay here with me? That was no good. If he was stuck in Highland, the story couldn't proceed at all. Except that. Smiled brightly. You're so contradictory. Wherever you are, except that. Isn't it good that you have a friend you could ask for help when there is a crisis in your life? Sigren sighed lightly. Fiona. What do you think of me? I regard you as the most precious thing in the world. Then what would you do if I left for somewhere? Of course I'll see you off hoping you're safe. I'll run to you if you need help. Sigren looked at me with a look that he was slowly getting angry. As expected, he was becoming more and more like Abel as the days go by. Forget it. I'm a fool asking for you a question. I let out a small sigh at the cold reaction. I looked at Sigren for a moment, then turned around, slowly walked towards my bed, trying to find my blanket. My shoulders were shivering for some reason. So, I wanted to wrap my blanket around my body. But I couldn't remember where it was. Sigren, thank you for finding me. Fiona. It took several months to finish some tasks before leaving Highland, and the day had come. The luggage I packed was simple considering I lived here for 5 years. It was because I was not someone who possessed many things, nor do I have an obsession with the things I have. Even Abel gave a comment as he approached me. There is no Sigren. He was very upset after I told him I'm leaving. Did he say anything else? He said he'd follow me. That's just like him. Abel grinned widely, which made me nervous. Then, Abel took a letter out of his inside pocket and handed it to me. What is this? This is a letter of introduction. Use it when you want to stay at Highland Mansion in the capital. I nodded my head calmly. The big bonus for the last one. Abel then responded gently, I don't know if it will be the last or not. What a scary word. So instead of responded his words, I just quietly took the letter and put it in my luggage. Thank you for everything. As soon as I got on the carriage, the door closed. The wheels began to roll slowly as I could hear the horse neighing. When I met Abel's eyes, I gently waved my hand. He looked at me for a moment and then said something as I saw his mouth moving. Fiona, we'll meet again. It was that. I blinked as I watched the scenery passing by more and more quickly as the carriage gained speed. I didn't know why everyone said similar things when I said I wanted to go to have a rest. Recently inside the house of Count Green was very noisy. As the eldest son, it is natural for me to be the head of this family, and it should be me who decides the issue of inheritance. Brother, tell me, which law in this country that stated only the firstborn who could be the head of the family unconditionally? There is none. In addition, we are Green family, a mage family. The only natural thing that happened is the one who could be the head of the family is the most talented magician among us. The head of the house, Count Green, collapsed without warning. Even more so, the healers had told them to prepare because it was unlikely he would ever be conscious. Because of that, since the Count collapsed even before he could write a formal will of inheritance, the siblings of course made a fuss over the property issues. Are you saying that now you're better at magic than me? Canedale glared at his youngest brother. Jane, the second child, was out of the picture for inheriting the position of the head of their family since she was married. However, his youngest brother, Jen, was a headache. Stop it. The Countess came into the drawing room where the brothers were fighting. I can't believe you brothers are fighting over this kind of thing. Did you know there has been a rumor about this family because of your fight? Mother, looked at what Jen did to me, give him some words. Jen didn't give up and fought back. Isn't what I did better than watching an incompetent older brother greedily wants to eat up the whole thing by himself? What? Stop. At the Countess' words, Canedale bit his mouth. I can't keep my eyes open anymore seeing brothers fighting so frivolously. Inheritance issues will be handled by me. Even Mother has no right to do that, Jen replied to her. What? Mother must have thought we wouldn't have noticed that you have a lover. Canedale gave a scornful smile. In fact, we also knew that Mother has been giving a lot of money to that blue-eyed kid lately. I apologized, but we definitely could not leave the inheritance issue to Mother. If we were to hand it to you, the Countess, whose face was blushed because of anger, cried in a hoarse voice. How could you talk to your mother who gave birth to you like this? Don't be so angry. We don't care what kind of young man our mother meets, but if such a rumor spreads to society, I'm worried that my noble mother will be hurt. The servant was frightened by the screaming of the Countess, so they spoke in caution. Madam, my lord, a guest has arrived, and I think you should check it out. Who the hell is it? That Lady Fiona Green, who left for Highland 5 years ago, is back. At the servant's words, the three people in the drawing room looked at each other with questionable faces. I can't believe it. She's still alive? It must be fake. It doesn't make sense a 13-year-old girl is still alive on the northern battlefield. She doesn't even know who to use basic magic. All three remembered about Fiona. The illegitimate child Count Green brought. The child they locked up in the attic because of how useless she was for them. Of course, none of them felt guilty about it. Get rid of her right away. It's a fake, no matter. Before the Countess' words finished fell, the door of the drawing room swung open, and a voice as smooth as silk resounded. That's too much. There was a girl in her late teens with wavy silver hair coming in, ignoring the servant restraining her. I just came back like this. She came slowly and spoke her words. I received your letter well. Of course, it was a sarcastic intention since the letter was sent to ask her deech certification. But, rather than giving you my death certificate, I like to show my face in person. Nope, I think you would like it more like this. Am I right? Fiona looked through the three hardened people. She then clapped lightly as if to evoke the frozen atmosphere. Since this cute youngest member is back after a long time, I'm sure you'll welcome me, right? She smiled brightly. Her lips, which seemed unusually red because of her extremely white skin, smiled deeper and deeper. I'm glad my family hasn't changed. She then added, with one more gentle tone. Sincerely. The birds chirping woke me up. The unfamiliar ceiling made me remember that I was not in Highland Castle, but Count Green's house. Yesterday, I arrived at an ambiguous time, so I just slept in this house. Fortunately, they assigned a normal room for me. If they were to give me the attic I had before, I would have turned this house upside down. The shocked expression of the Countess and my half-brothers came to my mind. They looked at me as if they had seen a ghost. I had no interest in the Green family's property, so I was wondering whether I should come to this house or not, but I was glad I came. I liked the stupid expression of those three. I brought the washing water. A maid's voice was heard outside of the door. Come on in. The maid opened the door and came in, then put the wash water in front of me. The basin was full of water, and because of how rough the maid put it in front of me, some water spilled on the floor. This maid should have been careful. In Highland, this was a rare mistake. Abel was a perfectionist, so all the maids of the castle were also excellent. But I wasn't picky enough to complain about this little mistake. So without a second thought, I tried to put my hand into the wash basin, but eventually stopped when I detected a bad smell. What is this strange smell? This is mop water. It was obvious that this was on purpose. When I looked up, the maid who brought the washing water had her face bowed. The corner of her lips trembled as she tried to hold back her laughter. I looked closely and I remembered that she was the maid that I saw often 5 years ago. She was one of the maids who was particularly harsh on me for being an illegitimate child. There was no doubt that this maid was able to act like this because she had the unspoken permission from the people of this family, including the Count Green and his wife. And this time, she got that invisible permission from the Countess. I managed to hold my sigh. Apparently, everyone in this family was still under the illusion that I was still a 13-year-old kid with no money, no place to go, and no power. If you all treated me like this, I don't think I could hold back the feeling of wanting revenge. Feeling the anger that swelled up inside, I touched the area near my lip. What is your name? It's May. The maid said her name while staring straight at Fiona. Okay, May. It's a face I remembered seeing before. Generally, in a noble family, a maid should not easily have eye contact with the noble they served. However, there was a reason why May could act so daringly. It was because she was one of the Countess' favorite maids. The Countess originally extremely hated Fiona, and now, with a dispute arised within the family over who inherited the property and the seat of the head family, it was natural that the return of the illegitimate child who she thought was dead was a sand in her eyes. And it was not only her, the other family members felt the same way as her. With the Countess on her back, May had nothing to fear. Even if she treated Fiona harshly, no one would blame her. Because this was the unwritten permission. Fiona Green. May laughed on the inside. The girl in front of her was just a grown-up girl. She had no power, all she had was half-noble blood. What a dream. Fiona looked at May for a moment, then said kindly. May, I believe you are aware of your own faults. May shook her head and replied fiercely. What are you talking about? In response, Fiona quietly raised her hands and covered her face. At first glance, it looked like her shoulders were shaking. What? She cries just because of this? Seeing Fiona like that because of her, May laughed inwardly. Slap. Suddenly her cheek was burning as if they were on fire. May was hit so hard that her head was spinning. She then put her hand on her cheek, dumbfounded, then looked at the girl in front of her. As I said yesterday, I'm glad that this family doesn't seem to have changed. Hey! What is this? May cried out in a hoarse voice. Fiona took a step closer to May, who was embarrassed. May, what did you do wrong? Obviously, Fiona was smiling brightly, yet May felt an unknown fear. Her lungs felt tight. Lady Fiona, did you realize that when you did this, it would be you who got in trouble? May bit her lips tightly and built her last pride. I would report this to the Countess right now. Slap. May felt a sharp pain in her cheek again, and when she looked, felt bizarre. Who am I, May? Fiona asked in a soft voice. Then, May stuttered. You're Lady Fiona. At that time, the fireplace in the room burned. Kaya. Then the window trembled more and more strongly, and the curtains flapped irregularly. The unknown fear was creeping from the way she looked at her. This can't be. May didn't know, but Fiona was someone who had fought against those monsters for quite a long time. Although she was not as good as Sigren, she could do the things that at least she could make an ordinary maid terrified of her. Also, because of her anger, the magical powers around her that she did not control were running wild. In Highland, where I've been living for 5 years, I even cut off the tongue of a servant who dared to talk back to their master like this. Fiona whispered as if she were talking about nostalgic memories. That cruel words, May's body was shaking. So, what kind of punishment does the capital city impose? I'm sorry. Sorry, my lady. May was so terrified that she began to shed tears. May, tell me. Who am I? Fiona asked in a sullen tone. You are the Green family's lady. Fiona May swallowed her tears while barely opening her mouth. Fiona smiled satisfactorily. Then what should you do? May bowed her head in a hurry. I won't do anything presumptuous again. Please forgive me. Yeah. As you should. As she walked away, May sighed relief in secret. She had to go and report to the Countess right now. However, contrary to May's thought, it didn't end there. Splash. Fiona poured the water from the wash basin onto May. Because of what was happening now, May couldn't say anything even though she was covered with smelly water. Water dripped down the ends of her hair and along her chin. Fiona looked down at May with an arrogant gaze. There was no smile on her face. Fiona then turned her back and said in an icy tone. If you do a boring trick again, I won't let it go. Bang! The door was closed. I walked down the hallway to cool my head. Sigren said that I had a bit of a temper. He even said that mine was scary, particularly because I smiled when I was angry. Where do you think you could wander around? I stopped walking at the sudden voice. How could annoying things come one after another? Then I quietly turned my body. There was Countess adorned with sumptuous dress and jewels. What's the matter with roaming around my house? The Countess unfolded the fan she holding. Why the hell did she need a fan at home? Is this your house? It seems too much for you that you forgot where you've come from. Everyone hadn't changed. And I really wanted to hit her. For a moment, I seriously thought about burning the Countess' complicated twisted hair. Get out of here. We don't want a rat in the gutter clinging to us asking to have something to eat. Be patient. Be patient. I am a rational person. I uttered a spell on my mind to calm my anger. But then I realized, why should I need to be patient? I've endured enough of this shitty thing, and also they were always the ones who started the fight. The Countess' attitude was a really last string. Should I say thank you for her showing this attitude? The little hesitation and annoyance suddenly disappeared. Thank you, madam. At my answer, the Countess drew a puzzled look. I gave her a bright smile. It motivated me to do something right. However, things happened differently from what I expected. Also, maybe May was the Countess' maid? Madam, I won't leave here with a single jewel that is rolling in this house. But I won't let you have it. So, don't worry about anything. If possible, it would be better if they were extremely greedy to their heart's content. Because the despair would grow even greater when everything they thought was in their hand disappear in front of their eyes. I smiled brightly. In thinking of throwing everything out of this house that day, I sent a letter to Abel. The content was simple, the preface of the letter from Fiona. It came sooner than I thought. After reading the letter, Abel put it down on the desk. Well, she also has a soft side. To be honest, this was what he expected. Abel leaned on the backrest, deep in thought. Fiona Green was a strange child. From her childhood until now, she was sweet and affectionate like candy, but she could become adamant and cold-hearted at some points. It was difficult for him to guess what her real personality was. Come on in. When Abel's permission was granted, it was Sigren who opened the door and entered. You're late. I came as soon as you called me. I don't even know why you called me. Yeah, keep acting like that. I just got a letter from Fiona. After reading the letter quickly, Sigren had a long sigh. There is only one thing in here. Are you going to complain that there is nothing related to you right now? I didn't even have that kind of expectation in the first place. Sigren replied sternly, handed her letter to Abel again. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. But it doesn't really matter. I'm going to see her anyway. Seeing his pupil's straight gaze, Abel slowly nodded his head. Good. Abel was not on good terms with the current imperial family. After he knew that Sigren was the illegitimate son of the imperial family, he took Sigren under his wings and suggested Sigren a few years ago that he should be recognized as an official son of the emperor. However, Sigren did not respond to the proposal. Then, recently, Sigren had made a decision on his proposal. Well, it was obvious what the cause was. But Sigren, if you want to return to the capital, you have to build a splendid achievement worthy of it. But if he carried the Highland family on his back, had a great achievement recognized by all the people of the capital that they even cheers for him, the situation would be different. People like dramatic stories. So, there is a need for something to imprint the existence of Prince Sigren to numerous nobles and people. Something that make people think there's no reason to ignore you. In other words, there was a need for a reason for those people not to openly touch Sigren. A story about a prince who saved a lot of people by catching the leader of the monsters in the barren land of Highland. I know. Sigren replied with a hardened expression on his face. If you meet all the conditions, I would provide the necessary stage for you. So if you want to get the prince's seat, if you want to go to your hometown. Abel raised the corners of his lips arrogantly as he looked at his disciple who was growing stronger like a rock that hardened day by day. Try to be hero sometime, Sigren. The reply from Abel quickly arrived. Of course, there was one condition attached. After your work is done, take a look around the Highland mansion and check it for me. In honesty, I expected that if I asked Abel for something, I had to grant him one request. I'm glad you didn't make me call you father. It wasn't that I hated Abel. I kept changing the original plot. The Abel I created was strict and cold, and he was the male protagonist's important assistant. Yet, suddenly that kind of person asked me to become his adopted daughter. I let out a little sigh. After this was over, I really wanted to rest. Now, we were really getting closer to the start of the original story, where Abel and Sigren returned to the capital. Shortly before that happened, Sigren succeeded in killing the cursed dragon that ruled the northern monsters. When he was back in the capital, he was praised as a hero. Then, the next thing that would happen was Eunice's turn to appear. To be honest, I really wanted to see Eunice a bit, but Sigren's behavior was a bit weird and made me worry. In these past 5 years, I had done everything I could do for him out of guilt. However, it seemed that the child I'd been taking care of grew up to be more stubborn than I thought and quite dependent on me. The weakness of Green family in my hand right now became my way to shake off my worries about Sigren. Because this thing needed to be addressed right now. Objectively, the Green family had a lot of wealth. However, the path to building their fortune was highly problematic. They had their hand on the drug business. Everything related to drugs was illegal in this country. If someone was involved in this kind of business, all of the property accumulated from this illegal activity would be confiscated by the state. In addition, the people who would get the punishment would not only be the ones who were directly involved, those of the same surname were included. If I made a mistake, I could be punished as well. As I holding Abel's letter, I created a light flame in my hand. Slowly, the letter burned black. Jen looked at me with a confused expression. What do you come here for? Despite the reaction, I maintained my expression. Third older brother, I came here to tell you something about the issue of the family's successor. Jens' one eyebrow went up. He then responded with a wary tone. Problem about successors? You don't have the authority to meddle in it. Yes, of course. How can I interfere with such serious matters? I just wanted to give you an opinion that it would be good if it's you that take over the title of Count. Then Jen asked with a questionable tone. What are you talking about all of a sudden? I opened my mouth with a sad expression on my face. The Green family is a mage family. I think it is right for the best mage in this family to inherit the title, rather than the first son to inherit it. Gambling debt. This brother has gotten into gambling and lost a lot of money. He was in dire need of money to pay his debt, but his pride was so high that he had been struggling alone. Now that suddenly, his father collapsed, naturally, he wanted to take over the family's property and make a plan to pay off his debt. Let's emphasize the word best. But there are a lot of problems right now. You don't know, but things don't go easily. No, actually, I came here to discuss something I found about the eldest brother. I took a small pocket the size of 3 fingers from my arms and handed it to Jen. This. Do you know what it is? Jan carefully opened the pocket and his eyes widened. This is a drug. Where the hell did you get this? Actually, yesterday, a maid found it in the eldest brother's room. Fortunately, I took it quickly when I saw it. You found something very important, Fiona. Thanks to you, things will work out. By the way, who was the maid who found the drug in eldest brother's room? But before I could tell him everything, I had something to say. So I opened my mouth carefully. I can tell you anything, but before that, I have a request for you. What is it? If older brother inherits the family, please remove me from the family register. What did you say? At the unexpected request, Jen made a puzzled expression. To be honest, I'm tired of being pointed at as an illegitimate child and constantly being misunderstood by family. Besides, I'm always causing trouble to this family just being in here, isn't it? I cherished my family in my own way, but I felt sad constantly in this position. Moreover, since this is the first time I came back to my hometown in a while, I really want to go out and do a lot of things. But I can't be the illegitimate child of this family for the rest of my life. Hearing my words, Jen said with a sad face. I understand, Fiona. You must have a really hard time. When I become the head of the family, I would definitely set you free. I smiled satisfied and whispered sweetly. Congratulations in advance, brother. Everything was going as planned. I had bribed some of the servants and had them rummage through Kanedel's room. Their mouth had already been thoroughly locked. The maids would testify to Jen that they accidentally discovered the drug while cleaning Kanedel's room and accidentally were caught by Lady Fiona just as Jen moved in full-fledged. Kanedel's animosity was also intensified. It's on your side who doesn't deserve it. No, it's not, it's you, older brother. You're not talented enough. Since then, the Greens brothers have started fighting the inheritance day by day. It wasn't too bad in the beginning. The Countess, who had tried to stop the fight a few times in the beginning, seemed tired of it, and then stopped interfering. She was not even in the mansion at all. It seemed she spent her time with her young lover. Nice, now I didn't have to do anything directly. They were being eaten up by their own greed. Rumors spread like snowballs. Well, I also helped it with my hand a little bit, which slowly made the lateral branch of this family question Kanedel's qualifications. After some time, the victor of the long brother fight was decided. Kanedel was expelled from the family. I was also sincerely happy to hear the news. I was getting tired of waiting for the conclusion of the fight between the two. Finally, it was time for me to take out the last block and completely collapse the tower. 2 days after sending the envelope, I went to Jen after completing the preparations. Congratulations on becoming the head of state. It's still temporary. Let's through the candy first. Who else would be the head of the family if it was not you, brother? Well, that's true. I smiled and handed over the document I was holding. It's what I asked before. Oh, right. Jen looked through the document and slammed the family's seal. Jen beckoned roughly and said, Now, get out of here. I have a lot of work to do. I have the last thing to tell you. Jen glanced up at me. What is it? I put my hand on the office desk and leaned slightly. And whispered as if telling a very important secret. There is no answer to gambling addiction. Especially when you are in debt. Hey, how do you know that? Jen opened his eyes round, shocked. Then, goodbye. As I walked down the hallway humming, I heard a shrill voice behind me. Why are you still here? I turned around and saw the Countess, lavishly adorned, stood not far away. A shameless thing. Don't think about sucking out and eating your older brother backbone. Get out of here. I approached the Countess. Looking at her face now, there was one thing I wanted to do before I left. I just remembered the last thing I have to do before that. I immediately raised my hand and slapped her on the cheek. With the sound of hitting the flesh, the Countess momentarily lost balance and collapsed. Huck. May breathed with her mouth covered, shocked. At my sudden action, the Countess stared at me with her lips trembling. Ho, how dare you do this to me? The Countess' finely painted red lipstick was smeared. I looked down at her with a rather cold gaze. When I think about it again, I want to hit you at least once. Then, I continued to talk by putting my finger up one by one. Kingdale was banished for nothing, Jen is going to chased by his debt for the rest of his life. So, wouldn't it be fair if Madam also got one hit from me? What kind of nonsense is this? It seems this lowly bloodline had loose her mind. Whoever, catch this crazy bitch. Lock her up. A woman rushed up, Madam. It's big trouble. Can't you see this situation? Right now the Countess frowned and exclaimed nervously. There are Imperial Palace's soldiers in front of the mansion. They said it's Imperial order. Hearing those words, I stopped what I was going to do. Imperial Palace move was faster than I thought. I thought it would take a few more days. The Countess, who was turning her head in embarrassment, made eye contact with me. No, to be precise, me who was laughing unintentionally. That's right, ma'am. I graciously acknowledge it, patted her on her shoulder as if comforting. Do you know that father and eldest brother have been working on the drug business? So I reported it to the Imperial Palace. The Countess' face turned white when she understood the meaning of my words. Then in a relaxed tone, I continued, maybe Madam do not know. But when the assets accumulated through illegal business are confirmed, all of them are returned to the National Treasury. Don't lie. Even if that happens, you would be punished too. I smiled at her and took the paper out of the envelope. This was the document confirming that I had already been expelled from the family. Countess. I looked at her expressionless. Actually, I was just going to let it go. Because I thought, I might have some responsibility to some extent, and feel guilty. I picked up the expensive brooch that had a blue jewel. But when I thought about it again, I did not find a single human decency in this house 5 years ago. Even from you people. I dropped the brooch in her hand and smiled softly. Now, cherish this. From now on, aren't we not going to see each other in the future? I walked through the Soldier's Gap with an unpleasant thought. Jen and Countess, as they grasped the situation, they were desperately denying reality and trying to run away. But obviously, they were caught. Of course, it wasn't my concern. The two of them, which had already been completed, put their heads down. And I now pondered on what to do next. Sigren put his sword down on the ground. Then Sigren glanced behind him. The dragon that had been giving heavy pressure and intimidation with only its breath lied on the ground, dead. Great work, Sigren. Abel approached him with rare praising words. Sigren replaced his answer with a slight nod of his head. How does it feel to kill one of the monster bosses? It just is. To be able to return to the capital and to receive the official appointment as a prince from the king, achievements were a must. So he killed the dragon. But there was no particular sense of achievement or satisfaction in him, as he now would return to the hometown of those who killed his mother and where he was. I don't know, she still has an attachment to the capital. Sigren kept thinking about Fiona. That girl was just talking about sightseeing without even knowing the impact of her decision on others' people's feelings. Abel smiled at him. It's okay, don't worry. Sigren looked up at Abel curiously. He still didn't know what he should do in the capital to hold of Fiona and not make her go again. The unique arrogant smile appeared on Abel's face. I have prepared the final weapon in my mansion for my poor disciple. At that, Sigren tried to inquire further, but Abel flapped her cloak and left to watch the other soldiers. How the hell should I do to hold of Fiona? Sigren knew Fiona didn't like being in one place too long. She always talked about how she was surprised she has been on Highland for 5 years. Sigren looked at Abel's back, stood up, took his sword, and fell into his thoughts. I won't hurt you. He remembered the whisper of a young girl. And someday you will. You will definitely have a lot. And the girl who said that was not beside him now. She gave the unpaid affection and left without any regrets. There was only one thing Sigren thought he wanted. But to get that one thing, he had to do many things. It was really ironic. Sigren walked to the dragon's corpse with his sword. He then cut through the dragon's chest and pulled out its heat, to use it as proof that he killed the dragon. First of all, it would start from this. This would bring a lot of honor. I slowly looked up at the mansion in front of me. Highland's mansion in the middle of the capital wasn't bad. No, it was much refined compared to the exterior of Highland Castle, which looked like a demon castle of the Northern Territory. Looking at the exterior, it seemed this mansion is well maintained. The exterior wall of the mansion was clean with no cracks, and the large training ground was well maintained. The garden was filled with flowers that matched the seasons. I really wanted to compliment the gardener. Well, I may not be very welcomed by the people here. In their view, I was like a supervisor sent from above. They couldn't say it out loud, but I was sure they were dissatisfied. With that thought, I knocked on the door of the mansion. I've already told the mansion's gatekeeper what was going on, so the story would have been passed to the inside.